Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel World Conflict Monitor. Please subscribe and like my videos. Today we are diving into a shocking development in Eastern Europe. Putin's sudden distancing from Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko as unrest continues to spread across Belarus. This move has left many analysts stunned, as Russia and Belarus have long shared one of the closest partnerships in the post-Soviet region. But recent signs suggest cracks are widening in this relationship, and Putin's latest decision to step back may have deep and lasting consequences for the region, for Lukashenko's grip on power, and for the broader geopolitical landscape of Europe. From the outside, the exterior of this crisis looks like a simple clash between an authoritarian leader facing protests at home and a stronger ally choosing to either support him or abandon him. Lukashenko has ruled Belarus for nearly 3 decades with an iron grip, surviving countless protests, economic downturns, and international sanctions. His partnership with Moscow, particularly with Putin, has always been the exterior armor protecting him from collapse. Russia provided cheap oil, military support, and diplomatic backing at the United Nations and other global platforms. In return, Belarus offered loyalty and strategic depth on Russia's western frontier. But today, this exterior is beginning to crack. What once looked like an unbreakable alliance now resembles a car whose paint has faded and body panels are rusting under the surface pressure. The exterior might still hold together for the moment, but beneath it, there are fractures that can no longer be ignored. Moving into the interior, things become far more complicated and revealing. Inside Belarus, the political system has been shaped almost entirely around Lukashenko's personality and authority. He has built a structure where opposition voices are silenced, independent media are crushed, and elections are widely regarded as rigged. The 2020 presidential election sparked one of the largest waves of protests in Belarusian history, with hundreds of thousands taking to the streets to demand his resignation. These demonstrations shook the very interior foundation of his rule, exposing weaknesses that had been hidden for years. What kept Lukashenko in power at that time was not the will of the people, but the overwhelming presence of the state security apparatus and, crucially, Moscow's backing. Putin extended loans, provided propaganda support, and even hinted at possible military intervention if Belarus spiraled out of control. But now, the interior climate is shifting again. Protesters may be less visible in the streets, but anger simmers quietly. Workers are frustrated, the youth feel trapped, and the elites who once stood firmly behind Lukashenko are beginning to calculate what life might look like without him. The interior of Belarus, much like the inside of a car cabin, is increasingly claustrophobic and suffocating, where those inside feel they have little room to maneuver. At the same time, Russia's withdrawal of unconditional support sends shockwaves through this interior, making it even more unstable and uncertain. When we examine performance, Lukashenko's regime has functioned like a machine that once promised reliability, but now sputters with inefficiency. His governance style, centralized, authoritarian, and heavily dependent on Russian subsidies, has delivered short-term survival but long-term stagnation. The Belarusian economy has performed poorly, weighed down by state control, lack of innovation, and limited trade partners due to sanctions. On the geopolitical stage, Belarus has been more of a follower than a leader, echoing Moscow's policies rather than shaping its own. But performance is measured not only in economic numbers, but also in the ability of a state to maintain legitimacy. Here, Lukashenko has failed dramatically. His reliance on repression and Moscow's shadow has robbed him of domestic respect and international credibility. By contrast, Putin's performance calculations may have shifted. Supporting Lukashenko no longer delivers the returns it once did. Instead, Russia sees growing costs in propping up a leader who has become increasingly toxic on the world stage. In this sense, the performance of the alliance is faltering, and Putin seems ready to test whether distancing himself might offer Russia more strategic flexibility. Safety features in this metaphor revolve around the protections that both leaders have relied upon. For Lukashenko, safety has always meant Russia's embrace. When protests surged, when Western sanctions mounted, and when his political future seemed at risk, Moscow's support acted like airbags in a collision, deploying quickly to shield him from the worst impact. But now, those safety features are being disabled. Putin appears to be signaling that Belarus must face its own turbulence without Russia automatically cushioning the blows. This creates a dangerous situation. Without Moscow's safety net, Lukashenko's regime could face real collapse if unrest grows or if elites begin to defect. For Russia, the safety feature has been Belarus acting as a buffer zone between NATO and Russia's western borders. If Lukashenko weakens or falls, that buffer becomes less reliable, creating vulnerabilities for Moscow. Thus, Putin's decision to step back is risky. It is like disabling a critical safety mechanism while still driving at high speed. The consequences could be catastrophic not only for Belarus, but for Russia's own strategic position. Unique selling points in this unfolding drama are worth highlighting. Lukashenko's unique selling point to Putin has always been loyalty and geography. Belarus sits at the crossroads of Europe, providing Russia with direct access to NATO's borders and a launchpad for both military exercises and political influence. Lukashenko has sold himself as the only leader capable of keeping Belarus in Moscow's orbit, preventing it from drifting toward the west like Ukraine did. But this unique selling point is losing its value. Lukashenko's unpopularity makes him a liability rather than an asset. Meanwhile, other Belarusian elites or opposition groups may also offer Russia assurances of loyalty, perhaps in exchange for a different kind of political arrangement. On the other side, Putin's unique selling point to Lukashenko has always been survival. No one else could guarantee his grip on power, but if that promise is withdrawn, Lukashenko is left exposed and vulnerable. What makes this moment historic is that both sides are beginning to question whether the unique selling points that bound them together are still worth the cost. The price of this rupture is enormous. For Lukashenko, the price may be his very survival in power. Without Russian backing, he risks being swept away by domestic opposition, or even replaced through internal elite maneuvering. For Belarus, the price is further instability, possible economic collapse, and the risk of becoming a geopolitical battlefield between East and West. For Putin, the price is more complex. On one hand, abandoning Lukashenko could reduce Russia's financial and diplomatic burdens. On the other hand, it risks creating a vacuum in Belarus that Western powers may try to exploit. Russia cannot afford to see Belarus slip away entirely, as Ukraine did, but it also cannot afford endless handouts to prop up an increasingly unpopular dictator. Thus, the price calculation is delicate, with both immediate risks and long-term consequences. In conclusion, Putin's shock move to distance himself from Lukashenko amid Belarus unrest represents a major turning point in Eastern Europe. The exterior of this alliance, once seemingly strong, is showing visible cracks. The interior dynamics inside Belarus are becoming more unstable by the day. The performance of Lukashenko's system is failing, unable to deliver stability or legitimacy. The safety features that once protected him are being withdrawn. The unique selling points that justified this alliance are losing value, and the price of this shift could reshape not only Belarus's future, but also Russia's strategic position in the region. For Lukashenko, this may be the beginning of the end. For Putin, it may be a calculated gamble to reposition Russia in a changing geopolitical landscape. The world will be watching closely, because what happens in Belarus will not stay in Belarus. It will ripple across Europe, NATO, and beyond.